My name's Emma Lai. I'm a sophomore here at UW-Madison, and I'm also a fellow for the Center for Religion and Global Citizenry here. I will be moderating the panel today, but a huge thank you to Andrea for helping make this panel possible and help with the Q&A session afterwards. Real quick, I am honored to be moderating these 5 outstanding women. Their biographies are in your programs, but I just wanted to take a moment to introduce these amazing and accomplished women at Interfaith. So first up, Rabbi Andrea Steinberger is a rabbi at Hillel Center here at UW and has been involved in the UW Jewish community since 1999. Pastor Erica Liu down at the end is a Presbyterian pastor at Press House, also here at UW, who has been serving there as a co-pastor since 2004. Sister Toni at Palermo is a Catholic school sister of St. Francis. She's a retired professional women's baseball player, but she now also helps those in need as a psychotherapist in the Madison area. Reverend Selena Fox is a Wiccan priestess at Circle Sanctuary in Barneveld, Wisconsin. She's also a prolific author and artist, writing many pieces which you can find in your programs. Finally, Ms. Janan Najeeb is the president of the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and has served on many different committees, such as the Committee for Interfaith Understanding of the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee. So, before we get started with our first question, I just wanted everyone to know that some of these questions might be a bit provocative. So panelists, please feel free to jump in at any time, but please don't feel obligated to answer every single one of these questions. Similarly, audience, we'll have Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, please fill out those note cards that are spread kind of throughout the table. Pens are provided, and if for some reason you run out, please just raise your hand and one of our volunteers will help you with that. You are free to include your name or remain anonymous. That's totally fine. With that, unless anyone has any questions, I think we're going to get started. So, the first question I have is, so all of you women are from very different backgrounds. So how have your experiences influenced your involvement in interfaith work? Kind of a big question, I know.
I'll give it a shot. I'll start us out.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. So, my name's Andrea. I'm Jewish. I'm a rabbi, and I work at Hillel, one of the Jewish student centers on this campus. I was thinking about an experience I had when I was 25 years old, and I was studying to be a rabbi. I studied at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, which is the seminary for the Reform movement. And I was lucky enough to participate in a program called Clinical Pastoral Education, which is a national program, and it's not just for Jewish people. It's really started in the Christian church and is available to people who are studying to be clergy. And it allows us to go into hospital rooms and meet patients. It teaches us a lot about who we are. It really gives someone who's studying to be a clergy person a lot of experience in understanding what they look like when they walk into a room, what they sound like, and being able to listen to another person and understand what's on their mind and be able to serve them as best as we can. So it was a tremendous growth experience for me. And I walked into hospital rooms every day for 10 weeks and all day long and sometimes all night long. And it was a tremendous opportunity for me to understand people of many different faiths and to know. So I walked into rooms of many patients who had never met a Jewish person before or never seen a woman in a clergy position. And I was also 25, not much older than most of you in this room. And I knew it was very difficult for people to understand what I was talking about when I said I'm studying to be a rabbi. It was like, it was not possible for some people to understand. What they understood was, I'm a nurse, I'm a social worker, I'm somebody who's coming in, what do I want? And so we would talk, and it was a tremendous opportunity for me to understand the humanity in each person, especially people who were facing very difficult health situations, many who were holding on to information from their families, who were afraid to talk to their children or their spouse about their diagnosis. And I served as an honest and open presence for them. And I learned so much. I learned how to pray with a person who is of a different faith from me. I learned to ask them what they wanted and to try to understand from our conversation what they needed. And it was an incredible opportunity. And actually, I would say I connected often much more easily with people who were not Jewish than for folks who were. Oftentimes, if I was meeting with a Jewish man, he would say, "You're not a rabbi, you're not a man," but someone who is of another faith. There were so many things about me that were other that they just didn't worry about it as much. They couldn't put their finger on what I was doing in the room, but they let me come in. So the CPE program is this amazing opportunity for people who are studying to be clergy to be allowed the gift of walking into somebody's life and just being an open presence. So that for me was one of the first interfaith experiences I had as a professional, and that was a long time ago, and I really refer to it all the time in my work in terms of approaching someone with openness and being a listener and being a receiver of what they need.
I too had experiences going into hospitals, and the same experiences of not used to women being in a ministerial role or doing a kind of chaplaincy. And I'd say some other opportunities to redecorate the halls of religion, as I call it, was when I started doing legal weddings. And most people have heard the phrase tying the knot. Most people don't know that goes to an ancient folk practice from old Europe called hand fasting, literally joining hands and tying a knot in a ribbon or a cord. So I started doing hand fastings, and while the people were involved in some form of nature, spirituality, Wicca, Druidism, paganism, families had many different spiritual traditions and cultural traditions. So I had an opportunity to break gender barriers and to diversify how you conceptualize the whole idea of a religious leader. Probably where I really broke through a lot of barriers was 1979, when Time magazine showed up at a pagan festival. And out of all the different things that they were looking at, they picked the hand fasting that I was doing for 2 chiropractors out of Georgia. And of course, we use a broom. We literally jump the broom at the end of the ceremony. The couple either steps over it or jumps it to symbolize going into a new life. And of all the pictures, what did they pick? Me holding a broom up. So all I can say is it's really good to be with women in interfaith and be part of the ongoing process of having more women in spiritual leadership and joining together, collaborating, and sharing our experiences.
Thank you. Well, I'm probably the only person here that is not actually a clergy. I'm a microbiologist by profession. So you're wondering how I got lost and sort of found my way on this panel. I actually started the journey into interfaith and learning about interfaith as a high school student with my parents. My parents in Milwaukee were they were immigrants, but they were part of the very first Christian-Muslim dialogue, what is believed to be the first Christian-Muslim dialogue in the country. It was started by a couple of Catholic nuns at Cardinal Stritch University. And when one of them was receiving a particular award, through the Archdiocese. She invited us, and that's when they noted that this was the first Muslim-Christian dialogue that had been started. And it was a very interesting experience for me, because once in a while I would tag along with my parents, and the Muslim community was not very large, yet at the same time there were so many different Christian denominations at the table. And what I found fascinating is that some of them were there because they genuinely were interested to learn about the Muslim community. Some of them there because I believe they thought that they could convert the Muslim community. Some of them there were just simply because they thought that, you know, this was an important aspect of the world that we live in. And I found that whole, you know, the dynamics of that very, very interesting. On top of that, I'm of Palestinian origin. I was born in Jerusalem. And so my parents, we grew up hearing that this was, you know, you were born in the land of prophets and messengers. And so this to me was a source of pride. And so growing up, there were not that many Muslims in Milwaukee, but there were quite a number of Palestinian Christians. And so what was very interesting is that because the Palestinian Christians lived amongst predominantly Muslims, so much of the culture they practiced was actually Islamic. They were Christian, but there was quite a bit of their culture that was in many ways Islamic. And we called them uncle and we called them aunt in the same way that we referred to others in the Muslim community. And so that's how it kind of the journey began. But then later in life, what happened is that as a professional, I realized that amongst a large number of other Muslim women that were gathering is that the number of stereotypes and misinformation about Muslim women was so great that we needed to create a really an opportunity to help others to understand. And so we formed the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition. Eventually we partnered with so many other religious groups, and kind of the rest is history.
Modern, is this coming through?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There's that one button.
Turn it on.
Dead battery.
Well, we'll pass on ours.
We'll
There we
let
go.
you share.
We'll pass on.
It might be an omen. This is my sense of humor, but I was picturing when they were leaping over the broom, that what if they tripped? Was that a kind of
That is a bad
is that
omen.
sign?
That is a
Very
very bad omen.
Well, this is going to be a good omen. I'm going to reverse it. You know, the first said, "We don't want to hear from you, Sister Toni." The other part of me said, "Yes, you will." Anyhow, my interfaith experiences have been so different. I never really sought out to convert or be visibly a Catholic or whatever, because my father was very ecumenical and he hated Catholicism, so that should give you a nice picture. Anyhow, then he was wanting to marry a Jewish woman, and we loved her, of course, because the faith was so different, you know, and the people that were involved. It never materialized. But we had such love and deep respect. You know, I always felt I was part Jewish myself. I don't know if that's correct vocabulary, but you understand what I mean. Anyhow, and then, you know, being an All-American Girls Professional Baseball player, the variety of women that were there, and they were deeply religious, and each going to their own churches, waking me up to go to church, and I did not want to go at all. I wanted to stay in bed and rest because we had a lot of needed energy to play. So that was another experience. And then throughout life, you know, joining the School Sisters of St. Francis, they're very ecumenical. And I think most women religious groups are. They're very open to the Spirit. In fact, we have interacted 3 times now, and she has done workshops at our community, religious community. So that's kind of, mine has been more indirect. So living next to people, that are Baptists, and they invite me to their church. Off I go to their church, because I always felt that God's church has no walls. I really did. It was a strong feeling. And in fact, when I was still a teenager, working at Illinois Bell, and a woman was getting married in a Lutheran church. Now that was not the place to go. You know, you don't go to somebody else's wedding. And everybody said, oh, are you going to go to her wedding, you know, being a Catholic? You know, think of the stupidity. But anyhow, I was so happy that I had to work at it. Even being raised almost ecumenical and hardly going to church myself, I still had that ingrained that, you know, you are Catholic, you don't go into somebody else's church if they're not Catholic. So I mustered up and I just got strong and I said, I'm going to her wedding, and I went. So that's kind of been something in me that I like, you know, that it's a little pixiness, and it's also, nobody can tell me not to do something. So then throughout that, then my neighbors, being Baptist, inviting me, then I went to their Bible study, and all of a sudden, as time went on, I started, they were telling me about people in need. And then the people in need were like more physical needs and apartments and having a place to work and all things. And before you knew it, religion does creep in. Because one thing, if they knew I was a sister, I never knew their religion and I never cared. You know, to say, what religion are you, then I can't interact with you. That wasn't an issue. So that was kind of what was happening. And then I had the beautiful experience of living one whole year. I had a Muslim woman living with me for one whole year. And again, she was being evicted, and I did not know religion or anything. I just knew, and I had met her only once. So I just knew she was a woman in need. And I learned so much because, you know, they pray 5 times a day. And I said, oh my God, I don't pray 5 times a day. And here I am, you know, a good sister. So before you knew it, Rugi and I were praying 5 times a day. But that's been more, my experience has been more indirect. And I think as God kind of leads you to different people, and all of a sudden they enter your life, and before you know it, you're being, you get broadened. You learn more about their faith. You learn more about their beliefs. And again, you don't, there's no judgment. And again, I kept saying, God's church has no walls. And I'll just end with this one thing. I was also in Mary Kay. I still am in Mary Kay. But in Mary Kay, they would have retreats. And then they would have, you know, at the end of the retreat, we'd have a gathering and a prayer service in the morning. And I was rooming with 2 people, and I again did not know what their faith was. But I remember the head of the whole retreat said, now I want to tell you, you know I'm a very strict Lutheran, but I want you to know that you can attend to her group. That you should feel free to attend, because whatever she's going to cover, don't worry, it is safe. I listened to the tapes, I listened to the tata. So when I got back to the room, I just assumed everybody was going, because I went to every retreat, and I was up there with the best of them. Well, anyhow, I said, what time should we get up? And they said, oh, we may not go. We are not permitted to go. And I remember it came out too fast. I said, oh, how sad. But anyhow, that has been my experience, more indirect rather than direct. And now I'm much more involved and more directly involved, because I think it's very important. Thank you, thank you.
It's good to be here with you all as I listen to your stories. Andrea is somebody I've known for a long time, but the rest of you are new to me. But I hear in your stories so much of my own story. And so I guess what I would say is I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's a little more diverse than here. And my household, my parents were culturally Buddhist, Confucius. So I would say like the Sunday, the Christmas and Easter Christians, or the like Passover Jews, you know, the ones who just showed up occasionally as part of their background, but they weren't religious in the sense that it was really a part of their lives. And so when I went to undergraduate at Berkeley, which if you know a bit about their reputation, that's not where you go to become a Christian, but that's in fact what happened to me. In fact, I would say I became like a white evangelical Christian, and yes, I know I'm not white, but that's another story. And so interfaith, that's not what we called it back then, but me dealing with people of different backgrounds, including my own, that was just a part of my life. And when I became a Christian, my parents were
mortified and horrified. They really thought, like, we did not send you to Berkeley to do this with your life. Because their God was the American dream, higher education, and they thought I was throwing my life away. So when I did enter into seminary, I actually had the chance to do CPE, the Clinical Pastoral Education, and I agree, one of the best ecumenical experiences forever, because all of that, of what you said, walking into a room, massive confusion for people, like, what are you doing here? And, do you speak English? Yeah, I do. I think they were disappointed to find that I'm not a doctor, which is probably what they expected, looking at me coming in, and they're like, you want to talk to me about what? So that has just been a part, I think, of my life. I think in a more formal sense, when I first moved to Madison, there are a lot of Christians around, if you haven't noticed, in the Midwest. And a lot of the Christian leaders that I initially encountered were men. And so when I got wind of a clergy group that were young female women, I immediately was like, I didn't know any of the people, but I'm like, can I have in? Because I was so desperate to connect to other women, and 2 rabbis happened to be a part of that group. And I will say that across my experience, and I think I heard this too, is that connecting with other women leaders in religious, whatever their background, I actually have a lot more in common with them, probably because of the struggles that we go through and the stereotypes, the prejudices. And so there's often a natural connection, and the parts that I probably struggle with most are those that are supposed to be closest to us, right? I probably fight more with my fellow Christian siblings than I would with Andrea. In fact, I call Andrea and Greg, if you know Andrea and Greg. Greg is her husband, her partner at Hillel. Well, my partner is my spouse as well at Press House, and they're like my Jewish counterparts, and they know and understand me way more than most of my Christian colleagues.
I'm glad you said that, because I agree.
Yeah, so there's, I think, a natural connection there. Some of the work on campus that I've done, if you've been on campus a while, we've done, Andrea's been a part of that with Grace and Faith, which is something we've explored a lot on campus and working with admittedly predominantly Christian groups, but we're hoping to expand that. And then I guess I would say that just because of the world we live in, we come across different people. Hopefully you come across different people in different backgrounds. In fact, if I had known you, since today's my first day meeting you, one couple asked me to attend officiate one of the best weddings ever, but they asked me to do a hand fasting, and I was like, okay, Google, what is hand fasting? If I had known you, I could have asked for some help on how to do that. It was the best wedding that I got to be a part of, because they were like, well, what do you want to be titled? And I'm like, I don't know, whatever you like. And so my title on this religious Wiccan sort of thing, and they knew I was a Christian minister, was Master Jedi Knight. And I say, I would love to be called that instead for the rest of whatever. So, yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. All right, well, thank you so much, all of you, for sharing briefly. So our next question, in the interest of time, maybe just hearing from a couple of you, but I guess, what does it mean to be a woman leader in your faith tradition? So that's very open-ended, I'm aware, but I guess, like, what does it mean to you to be a leader?
Well, there are 2 aspects to it. One part is being a leader within your community, and the other aspect is being a leader outside of your community. So within your community, you are dealing with a variety of different things. First of all, because of the fact that you have been able to establish so many connections, I think you end up carrying that clout with you. At the same time, you're dealing with many different people, particularly within the Muslim community. You have immigrants, you have people that have been born here, you have educated people that are a little bit less educated. But what the biggest problem that I encountered is people that come sometimes with cultural baggage and their particular understanding of what it is to be a female leader. Now, don't get me wrong, because cultural baggage sometimes is an absolute conflict with what religious tradition and religious teaching is. But people come with that particular cultural baggage. And so there are sometimes people that have specific assumptions as to what the role of a woman is. And so that's something that then again, involves education, and you have to counter that with specific Islamic teachings. Outside the Muslim community, we're sort of like a sideshow. You know, it's like, oh wow, the Muslim woman is here. Look at, you know, and for a period of time, it's not so much now, but I can tell you when I was going out to speak a couple of decades ago, I was like kind of like the rock star. Wherever I would go, I would end up with people around me just kind of checking me out. It's like, they let you out of the house, you know what I mean? There's just these assumptions and these stereotypes. So you have to deal, you have to deal with both of those issues. Definitely now I think things have changed tremendously because there are so many, I mean, we've got Muslim women in Congress now, things have changed, but this is where we started. And, being a Muslim leader, you don't just kind of get up one day and say, I want to be a Muslim leader. You know what I mean? A female at that. What it really is that there's a need. There was a tremendous need out there. And the reason that I left my career to go into this field is because I felt that if I didn't make a difference, my children are going to suffer as a result of that. And I felt that I needed to start having that impact. And so I got into that, and just by virtue of the fact that, the collaborations we created, the workshops we created, the extensive outreach we did, that's what, led people to call us leaders. But we didn't just kind of wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a leader. And because of that, as a result of that, people then within the community itself, within the Muslim community, there became that recognition, and they themselves then started saying, this is, our leader. This is, we have a leader here.
So within nature spirituality as a whole, and Wiccan spirituality in particular, women leaders are commonplace. And there's been gender equity hardwired, and I'd say within the tradition, as a woman, I have had the privilege to help create and facilitate a variety of rites of passage connected with women's stages of life. I've been at birthing centers, including right here in Madison, helping to bless the baby as the baby comes forth from the mother. I have done baby blessings, although men and women both do that in our community. I help create and still help facilitate the coming of age into young womanhood. I do all sorts of coming into elderhood ceremonies that are known as cronings. And so when women at the other part of life have stopped their cycles, well, we celebrate becoming an older woman. Outside of the tradition, I have gone where no pagan priestess has gone before on some occasions, including with my friend who's now in what we call the other world, Margot Adler, who used to be a journalist with National Public Radio. She and I were part of a very special Interfaith conference in 1988 in Toronto. And we were the two women from nature religions that were invited to be at this World Council of Churches' first International Interfaith Dialogue Conference for Women. It was all women for the most part. They did send at least one man from Switzerland to keep an eye on us, which I thought was funny. But I've had the opportunity at international interreligious gatherings to be able to talk about women's leadership with people from many different paths and countries, most recently at the Parliament of the World's Religions, which was held in Toronto. And they started at the 2015 Parliament of the World's Religions a women's inaugural assembly to really bring women from around the world, not only religious leaders, but leaders in other ways, and scholars, to come together and talk about women's issues on an international, interreligious way. And I was able to not only do presentations there, but was part of my very first women's interfaith art salon. So I celebrate the opportunity within traditions as well as outside to actually celebrate my womanness.
Do we have time for another?
I'm sure if you'd like.
Well, I'd really like to say a few words because so much of what you've said, Janan and Selena, really resonates with me. Judaism, well, as are most of these religions, really, all of us, it's such an old religion that many people really do not associate the name rabbi as a female. So I really want to recognize that some of the things that I do are so dissonant for people. So working on a college campus, if I lead a prayer, it's sometimes very shocking for people in the room. They've never seen a woman lead a prayer. Like, let's say I'm leading the Kiddush, which is the Friday night prayer at the Shabbat, at the Sabbath table. And if I lead, there have been times where I've led the Kiddush and not only led it, but I'm a long time ago, holding with my baby on my hip. And with one hip holding the baby and the other hip holding the wine cup. And I have had people who have come to me. First of all, there was a professor who went to Hillel for many years, and he grew up in an Orthodox home, which is more traditional than the home that I come from. And he used to say to me, like, seeing you lead this prayer, holding a Kiddush cup and holding a baby it's like something in my whole life I've never imagined. And he grew to really love it. I mean, you have all these 18-year-old young men and women, and then you have this 75-year-old man who would laugh as I led the Kiddush, laugh out of pure joy that he was able to live long enough to see something that he would never have considered in his lifetime. And so I know that even, so in my mind, when I began as a rabbi, it was the 20th year celebration since a woman had become a rabbi. The first woman was ordained in 1972, and I started rabbinical school in 1992, and I was aware of how much was a complete luxury for me to go. These women had paved the way, and they had really suffered. They had really suffered with professors and with their classmates who really gave them a hard time, and their life was difficult, and my life was easy in comparison going to school there. So I want to say that things that I do, even if I do them exactly as a man, even if I was reading the same script that a man, people look at me and they'll say, "You did it so differently." And there are things that I've become aware that, just my physical presence, saying word for word the same prayer as a man is just mind-blowing for some people. It can be a very negative experience for them, and I need to be aware of that. It can be mind-blowing, and it can be, but what I want to end on with my comment of this is to say that can be truly inspirational for a person, and especially young women. I think to have a woman on campus who is a role model and is leading a Jewish life and is balancing work and family and is really showing that being a leader in our tradition is possible. And so I feel, I know there have been times where also I've read from the Torah, read from our kind of foundational book, and I'm holding my child as I'm reading, and women will say to me, "I have never imagined that a woman would be reading the Torah and holding a baby, bouncing a baby with them, and you have changed my life, and I'm going to be able," it's just something changed in me where I know I can do more than one thing. That if I want to be in a profession that I can marry and have kids, or if I marry and have kids that I won't give up my professional life. No matter what I do, it just sort of shifts in a person's brain when they see a woman balancing more traditional roles and also being a professional. So those are the moments where I know they may have a very negative impact on somebody who has never seen that happen, but they may inspire somebody to really go forth in their life in a way that they hadn't thought possible before.
Well, thank you very much for those inputs. My final question before I open it up to questions from the floor is, I guess, as women leaders in your faith communities, what advice would you give our generation as we go forth engaging in interfaith dialogue? What do we do now?
Start, Erica. Toni, you want to start? Thank you, my dear.
So one of my favorite metaphors is thinking about it as a marathon, right? This is not a sprint, and so, and this doesn't include just young women, I think. Like, this is not just women's work, this is humanity's work, but this is a marathon, right? We've had thousands of years of patriarchy, so we're not gonna undo it in a generation. We're gonna have to keep at it, and so you have to recognize the larger scale picture of it, and know that you live in a particular time and context, and you will be given particular opportunities that are specific to you. Be aware of that and know it, and then know that you're running that marathon because I've never run a marathon. I have no desire to run a marathon, but I'm gonna bet that those of you who have, and those, you know, I can imagine that mile 23, you know, the person's not like, wow, this is amazing, I love it, it feels so good. They're thinking like, oh my God, kill me now, this hurts so bad. And that makes sense, right? If you're at mile 23 running a marathon, you're gonna be in a lot of pain, and you're gonna be exhausted, and you're gonna wanna give up. So if you know that, it doesn't make it less hard to run, but you know that, that's the way it's supposed to be. This is really hard work. And those who run marathons know they have to gather a support team, so that at mile 23, they can keep going. You do not do this work alone, right? Everything that you do, you need people around you, and so you have to cultivate that. So I guess those would be two very practical things. Like, you have to be aware of your context, know that you're training for something long haul, gather a support team, because there will be division, there will be conflict, you will encounter yucky stuff and people who, you know, as you put it so diplomatically, have problems when they see you in that role. I mean, I've definitely had my fair share of that. And, you know, we all know that destruction is so easy to fall into. Like, it doesn't take anything to destroy something, but to build a bridge, to really build the kind of things that you're building is just long, often gloryless. Is that a word? You know, it's not glamorous. It's just really hard work. So those are the things I would say to those of you who are entering into this work and engaging in it. It is so necessary, so worthwhile, but it's a marathon. Know your seasons, know your context, cultivate the team. So the relationships you guys are building today, don't lose touch with each other. Know that, you know, you may not see each other all the time, but as you're doing this, know that there are people doing that work with you, so don't do it alone.
It's interesting, I've been viewing the audience here, and your attention is beautiful. I mean, the one with the hat over there, she's really involved, and so many of you, and I thank you. And you know, I got to thinking, I love that the men are here also, because this is not just a woman's issue. But way back, you know, women really have taken such lower roles. I mean, they didn't believe in themselves. I mean, there were, individually, we believed, but not as a group. And I remember one time going to some function, and all these doctors were there. They were PhD people, not medical doctors, and they were introducing themselves, Dr. So-and-so, Dr. So-and-so, Dr. So-and-so. I had my PhD, and I never said I was Dr. So-and-so. I went home and I said, why in heaven's name did you not introduce yourself? See, we would take that humble role, you know what I mean? You didn't want to be showing off. And here they were math teachers, they were not medical people. And I was not a medical person. So that was an eye-opener, and from there on, I was Dr. So-and-so at the appropriate place. So I wanted to mention that. The other thing is that men and women can work together beautifully. And women can support men, and men can support the women. And on this planet Earth, there are so many problems and issues. There's so much to do. You don't have to go looking too far. There are issues and people who need help, causes that need help. individuals that are falling apart. I mean, there's so much depression running around. I don't want to make you, depressed by saying that, but there's so much sadness. And you people, you have to be alert. They're right next to you. And you take the opportunity to do something at the time. We don't have to do monumental things. You don't have to create big programs. They're right there next to you. And I tell people, I said, be alert. Be alert. I don't know if there's somewhere else in another world, but I mean, I can feel the pain around me. And people that need to be lifted up, people that need our help. And every one of you today, just if each one of you found one person that crossed your path that you can help in some way, that's interfaith. That's talking leadership. And if you're not a leader inside here, you have to really work at believing in yourself and get rid of all that baggage and whatever negative that's pulling you down. You've got to believe strongly. Say, I am someone. I can do things. I can make a change on this planet Earth. If you strongly believe that, you will make a change. They read it in your face. They read it in your whole total body, your soul. They read it. So be alert. Look around. And today when you leave, you find one person or one cause or one something that you can make a difference. I will be so happy. And I'm going to pray that you are inspired, that you are enlightened, and you feel it. Because sometimes you're caught in all the junk that we're doing all the time. And we go from one event to another event, and before you know it, you're 100 years old. I keep saying, oh God, even if I lived to be 200, I couldn't accomplish what I need to accomplish. So don't live from event to event. Live from the moment to the moment. And see what you can do. Say, what's present to me? What is, even right here, my little darling here, my little sweetheart here, Press House, I was related to all of these people. It's amazing. In some way I was related. And and here we are, all doing our thing. But I'll bet you 10 to 1 that our awareness is probably a little bit stronger than some of your awareness. And maybe, possibly, your awareness could be 10 times stronger than ours. But our experiences have led us to be alert, be aware, look around you, and make a change on this planet Earth. I don't want to hear anything, oh, I can't. And when they say, I hope so, I hate when people say that to me. I said, no, I know so. And then they'll say, take care. And I said, and take charge. Take charge of your lives. We all are trying to take care, one way or another, sometimes too much care. Take charge. And when you take charge, what a different world we're going to be living in. All of us will be connected. Nobody will be judging. I used to say, deliver me from the good Christian. Forgive me for saying that. But there's more. The judgmental one, the negative ones, and they have it's all in the Bible. They know exactly, quote to quote to quote, to tell you what doesn't work, what you shouldn't be doing. Forget it. Deliver me from that. You want to be free of that. Be alive and go make a change on this planet Earth. Amen.
I'm just going to take 30 seconds. I don't want to, I think she ended on such a wonderful note, but one of the things that I really do want to emphasize is that this whole journey of interfaith, it's really, at least for me, been probably one of the most enriching aspects of my life. It's made me a much better Muslim. It's made me a much better human being. And I see interfaith really as that social change that needs to take place, because you build alliances, you build coalitions with people that believe in the same causes of social justice as you do. And you really, this is not something that we do alone. We have to do it humanity together. And so regardless of what field you get into, interfaith should always be a part of your life. And it shouldn't be a compartment. It should be just a natural part of what you do every day.
Amen. All right, thank you.
I have 3 quick things. Connect with a daily spiritual practice. Honor the divine, whatever your particular tradition is. And I say daily so that it is part of your life. Connect face to face. This is a good start. There are interreligious events that happen in many different places, go to them. And besides honor the divine and connect face-to-face, connect in cyberspace. Yes, there are a variety of different websites. The Pluralism Project coming out of Harvard University on Common Ground. I'm not only plugging it because I helped with that project many years ago, but they've been tracking American religious diversity for many years. Great resource. Parliament of the World's Religions, United Religions International. There's a variety of things. And not only with the cyberspace consume, but put forth positive messages. And when there are disasters, natural disasters, and disasters caused by bigoted humans, join in interfaith prayers, not only in your own life, but put some messages out in cyberspace that we are together and we support each other.
Thank you all so much. It was very inspiring, and thank you. So we have a few questions that we've collected from the audience that Euphoria is going to read off, if that's all right.
If anyone still has like note cards at their table that they'd like to ask.
I'll come collect.
Yeah, we're collecting those. Sounds good.
Perfect. Okay, so starting off with our first question, how do you discuss racism within your religion?
How do you discuss
Racism. The theme of the conference is intersections, so yeah.
Do you want, can you hear me if I just talk? Okay. I talk about it all the time because you can't avoid it. American Christianity is like, you know, birthed in racism. It's the whole like foundation. And so for my own self, I mentioned I kind of came to the Christian faith through white evangelicalism. And I had to work many years to decolonize my soul, and I am not done yet. I am still in process. And I would say that many of us, including those who are white, that is not a work you finish. And so for me, being faithful means that you have to talk about it all the time. And I don't, I think that if you don't, well, for me, and in my community, that is absolutely necessary, because the greatest commandment for, in my understanding, is that to love God, you need to love your neighbor. And if you cannot explicitly deal with the fact that in this context that we are in, a nation that is, you know, founded and born upon the kidnapping of people and the genocide of people, justified by faith, you just can't get past that ginormous thing. So, what was the question? How do you deal with it? Like, it just, to me, it's like, it's not even like it's not like, well, how do you deal with women? It's so in it. It's like, you can't not, right? It's like, I can't talk about God without talking about that, because it's so inherent in this, you know, and this is the context I know best here in America, faith, so all the time.
Can I comment on that too? I have such a strong urge inside, you know, there's no room for racism, but we know it's there. It's horrible. You know, I remember saying to one of my friends this way back, and I said, you know, I don't see color. And he said to me, how can you say you don't see color? And I was trying to, you know, say I'm not prejudiced, I'm not this and that. I don't see color, Jim. He said, it would be better to hear that you see color and you love it. So after that, I would say, I see color and I love it. Because, you know what, it's there. We shouldn't be seeing we see it and we love it. We see the different eye shapes, we love it. We see everything that's different, we can love it. We don't have to love the actions all the time, but we don't have to pass a judgment. But we have really microscopic eyeballs, and we're looking and we see, that one's black, that one's, she could be Asian, that one's this, that. Why? We're so intellectually educated that we're ignorant. We've got to open up and get rid of all racism, because it's destroying us. It truly is destroying us. Embrace one another. Look what's in this room. Turn around and look at each other. You want to talk race, different faces, different cultures, different everything. And we're all sitting, we're not killing each other, right? And we have a beautiful face, we're loving. You're loving what you hear and you're loving each other, I'm sure you are. Thank you.
I'll add one thing.
Okay.
So I'll just add too that that in the Jewish tradition, I think there has been over the centuries an assumption that there's a look to a Jewish person. And that look is probably because over the centuries we have been related to each other. That no matter where Jewish people lived, that they maybe were genetically related to one another. But that assumption is an old assumption, that there are so many ways that people are coming to the Jewish people. And a lot of times Jews are not quite up to understanding that. The Jewish people doesn't look just one way anymore. And I think that's one of the things that Jewish people need to understand. Not even looking at, interfaith work, but that when a person comes into our Jewish space, that we cannot tell by looking at that person what their identity is, if they are a Jew or if they're not. And I think that's one of the things that's been exciting about working on a college campus, the openness at Hillel and at hopefully all of the Jewish organizations on the campus to opening ourselves up to a person and allowing them to identify who they are and what they are. Because we can't tell. Jews will tell you that you can tell who is a Jewish person by the way we look, but that's not always the case. And I think that's one of the most important things that's happening in the Jewish community is understanding that there are many ways that a Jewish person looks today.
Can I just add one brief aspect? We think about racism as if it's only about race, but there's economic racism, there's social status, there's a lot of different things that I think we tend to ignore sometimes. And for Muslims who have often been on the other end of racism, 40% of the slaves brought to this country were Muslim. Muslims have reeled from colonialist rule that continues to create upheaval in many of the Muslim countries. And I think what affects Muslims more than kind of like racism looking, because Muslims are so diverse and overwhelmingly we're brown people. So most of the racism tends to be more internal, where they have come to believe sometimes in some countries, and you see this interacting with people from certain areas where they have come to believe what colonialist powers have told them, that you need to dress like the West, or look like certain ways, have your cosmetic surgery to look a certain way, you need to dye your skin to be white, because that's what you want to attain, because that's what success looks like. And so I think that internal racism is also something that we really need to think about.
And for us, we've taken it out in cyberspace through podcasting. When Black Lives Matter started emerging, I put together a special podcast and brought people of color and people of diverse racial backgrounds on to have conversation with each other in a live podcast where people could interact and that we would archive it. But most recently, we've expanded our conversations across racial lines to also include across languages and across cultures. And internationally, we have just launched a podcasting network, CSNP, Circle Sanctuary, Podcasting Network, I think, networking podcasts, that's right. And what we are doing is having our Saturday show be with people who are pagan from around the world, talking about the faces of paganism in their country and how they're celebrating diversity. So I think it's wonderful that this panel is representing diversity and that we all are part of the solution and not the spiritual pollution regarding racism.
I really just have to comment that I love that. No pollution here. The caste system, all of it, we can broaden the definition of racism. Economically speaking, all that takes place. we have to define what racism is within our heart, because we might be sneaky and guilty of a little bit of racism that we don't know. So we have to clean up our own act inside. Really examine it, and it's a daily thing. It's not like I've arrived. No, every day we have to keep working at it. And I want to, again, put the challenge to you. Redefine racism for yourself. Find out what it truly is. It's not just the face, the color, the this. It's many, many aspects. And I so agree with everything that was said. But I just want to encourage you to go out, dig in, and you have to, the fight is work. It's work inside. Daily work, minute to minute. Thank you.
Okay, so this next question is for Reverend Selena Fox. Do you ever encounter people who argue that various pagan faiths are crazy? And how do you communicate with those people?
All the time, unfortunately. Have to monitor that Facebook feed and turn in the haters and offer corrective feedback to people that are just ignorant. And really, I put it in those categories that there are some who are intentionally prejudiced, and are you really going to say anything that will help them get an understanding? Love in one's heart and lawyer up if you have to. And for the people that just have misinformation, because we really have been dealing with over 1,600 years of bad PR. Even the word pagan for some people, it's like, ah! And the Wiccan word even has become, ah! And then there's that witch word. Oh my goodness, what is that? And when we use the witch word, it's something that's coming from Glinda the Good in Wizard of Oz, not the one after Dorothy and her little dog. No. And so certainly there are still a lot of misconceptions, not only about people that are contemporary pagans, but people involved in nature religion as a whole. I was in England speaking in 1996 to a conference on nature religion. And part of what scholars were wrestling with is how are all these highly educated people dancing around bonfires and howling and having all this revelry and doing this maypole thing, and why? And there was prejudice against the fact that, well, can you develop yourself intellectually? Will that eventually take you into some other religious realm? Primal religions are still struggling to have equal representation, and not only those that have their roots in old Europe, but in other parts of the world. And I do think that it's really important to be allies to those of us who are involved in nature religions. There was a conference put on by a major university a few years back about environmental attitudes across the world religions. Were nature religions invited? No. Was there an opportunity to give them corrective feedback? You betcha. So having started Earth Day along with thousands of other people back in 1970, I can tell you with contemporary paganism and other forms of nature spirituality, environmentalism is hardwired, and being perceived as crazy, demonic, intellectually inept is not helping us with our lives or contributing to the greater inclusion of a world where we get along and cooperate. So I have come up with a variety of things, including joking about which witch is really which. When I spoke at my campus, my alma mater, College of William and Mary last week, we were celebrating 100 years of letting women into the college. And it was a campus-wide presentation, and there were people really wondering, who's this Wiccan priestess and what's this about? But being able to really draw on the best things about intellectual development and being open and having conversations is really important. So whoever wrote the question, thanks for asking.
I think we have time for just one more question. In your experience, what is the role of women without a faith in interfaith work?
What was the question again?
What is the role of women without a faith in interfaith work?
So are you talking about spiritual and not religious, or are you talking about free
The
thinkers?
question doesn't specify.
Okay. I'll make it short. Every December, I am in a very old Unitarian Universalist church building in Salt Prairie, Wisconsin. And it's the free thinker solstice. They're atheists, they're agnostics, they're secular humanists, and they're free thinkers. And why do they have a Sunday service and invite a pagan priestess who's clearly rooted in religion to come and speak? Because within our expression of nature spirituality, we also include those who would say they don't have a faith. And then there's this other piece, which is spiritual and not religious. Indeed, I spoke at my campus last week in a religious studies class, and the name of the class is Spiritual but Not Religious, and really talking about, especially with, if you can't deal with the millennial word, you can talk to me later about it, but the whole idea that there are people that are choosing to do their spirituality without a religious institution. And I do think we who are in interfaith need to be able to connect with people wherever they are, because at the core of all of this is love. And by us coming from that space, we can work together and make a difference. Martin Luther King Jr. said, and my very first interfaith work was doing support work for that March on Washington in 1963. I had my eye on the prize. Well, that prize is truly world peace, harmony, and collaboration. So I'm truly hoping that we can do.
Inclusive.
Do you want
Yeah, I just wanted to tell a short story from the time of the Caliph Ali, who is after the death of the Prophet. He was the both the cousin and also the son-in-law of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so he had sent a contingent to Egypt at that time. For the purpose of creating relations and learning about the different people that lived in different places. And so they sent a message. The person that was the head of this group sent a message back to the Caliph, and he said, we have met people here in the land of Egypt that we've never met before. We're familiar with the Christians and the Jews because they lived in Mecca, and they lived in Medina, and they lived in these areas. And we were even, familiar with the pagans of Quraysh. But here we've met people that worship things and do things and understand things in ways that we don't understand. So how do we deal with them? And so the Caliph Ali sent a message back to them, and he said that if they are not your brothers and sisters in faith, then they are your brothers and sisters in humanity. So deal with them that way. And this is from 1400 years ago. And so this is something that we need to understand. As Muslims, we believe that journey is a personal faith, that faith is a personal journey. It's not for us to determine what journey people have to take. That's where free will comes in. What our responsibility is to deal with all human beings as being members of humanity. If they're not committing crimes or dealing with people in ways that's oppressive, you need to deal with them as brothers and sisters in humanity.
I'll just add one more thing, which is, to the person who wrote this question, I think that a person who doesn't have faith or is questioning really describes more people, a majority of young people today and a majority of people my age. It certainly describes many, many people who have Jewish heritage, and I would imagine that people who are Muslim and Christian may feel that way too, that they maybe belong or have a heritage with a group of people but worry that they don't fit in because they don't have faith. And so the words that you've said here really resonate with me, that, more than what divides us, we're part of something that's bigger. Whether we agree or disagree about how that came about, it connects us, and we're a part of something that unites us. So it doesn't take having a faith to work together. And I think that all of us, understand that, and I hope that that's a message that we can convey to you, is that that's not what we would look for, is to work with someone, only a person who has faith. I think that our human connection, an interest in finding what we have in common, an interest in bettering the world, an interest in quashing the hate that's out there and the misunderstandings among people is what really connects us. And I hope that more than anything that we would get that message to this group of people, certainly, is that it doesn't take having a faith to work together with other people.
I wanted to add to, I think that we limit the word faith to religion. And I think you have to really define it differently in yourself. You know, it's a belief system, it's heart and soul of humanity. It is just not, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Muslim, I'm a this, I'm a that. It has probably the least to do with that, and yet it's very important. So redefine faith in your hearts. And the other thing is, you cannot have faith and a belief in anything in your heart and soul of goodness. You cannot have that and be prejudiced. You cannot have that and be less inclusive. You have to be all for humanity, or you don't have it. So find out what that faith is in you, define it, and go for it. You know, and be inclusive, open up your arms. This is humanity. If we don't work together, we're not going to be together. Okay, thank you.
One practical suggestion I would say for people who don't identify with a particular community, I actually think there's a really valuable role for people who are in such places, because I think they ask the best questions.
Yes.
And they can stand outside of it enough, and with a heart that I think is good intention, meaning you're actually curious. You're not just trying to ask questions to be an asshole, right? You're asking questions because you truly want to know. And that natural curiosity, I feel like, is so absent these days. And I think we have a number of people who would say they're atheists in our community, and they're honestly the most faithful people I know. I mean, in the sense that, like, I would rather hang out with them often. But they ask the most honest questions that help give people who are kind of entrenched in their places they just don't even know to ask. And that's such an important role. So I think there's a very critical role, actually, for those who don't identify with a particular tradition in interfaith work, because they can change a conversation and they can help people think about differently in those traditions, to go like, I don't know, that's because it's the way it was. Well, why? Tell me more. So that's a particular role I think folks can play.
So that's all the time we have for today, and I apologize if I didn't get to your questions. Thank you all for coming, and I'd like to invite our mentor, Ulrich, to give the closing remarks.
I would suggest maybe those questions can be given to us on an email, and if we would like to respond to you, we would do that with your email address.
We'll put the question and answer on
Any
our
of those.
website.
And I, before I say anything, I mean, we have to applaud this panel